Ethan Drake awoke to a typical sunrise in the year 2157. His loft in Neo Celestia bathed in the pale glow of a city that never truly slept. The crystalline towers shimmered and reflected the morning light in dazzling prisms, giving the appearance of a grand mosaic in constant motion. He sipped his coffee, dark, rich, and comforting, while he gazed upon hovercars weaving effortlessly among the skyline. City life was calm yet charged with the subtle promise of unending progress, something that Ethan had grown so accustomed to. He rarely noticed the marvels that surrounded him. The hush of his morning routine was broken by an unexpected, measured knock upon the door. The sound carried with it an otherworldly note, almost echoing with a resonance beyond simple, mundane rapping. Ethan placed his coffee mug on the counter, ignoring the slight tremor of unease that coursed through his hand, and went to open the door. There, framed by the threshold of his modest apartment, stood a tall, silver-skinned figure with eyes like distant stars. A faint glow seemed to ripple across the visitor's skin. His attire was regal yet understated, a flowing robe woven from threads that reflected soft blues and gentle golds with the slightest tilt of his form. "I am Ambassador Zevran of the Galactic Council," announced the being in a voice both resonant and strangely melodic. "May I enter?" Before Ethan could respond, his coffee mug slipped from his grasp, the ceramic shattering against the floor with a muted crash, droplets of steaming liquid splashing against his shoes. Earth had joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago, yet this was his first personal encounter with any of its alien representatives. He swallowed hard, heartbeat quickening. "Yes," Ethan managed, stepping aside in silent invitation. Zevran moved across the threshold with a composure suggesting centuries of ritual and formality. His luminous gaze swept across the apartment, taking in the shelves of books, the modest furniture, the small cooking station, and the large windows that overlooked Neo Celestia's glimmering skyline. If he found any of it lacking, he showed no sign. "I bear news of great consequence," Zevran began, each syllable dropping gently into the air as though carefully placed. "News concerning your lineage, specifically, your grandfather, Victor Drake, who was long presumed lost to the void." Ethan's mouth went dry. He had barely been 10 years old when his grandfather, a pioneering astrophysicist and flamboyant explorer, vanished during an experimental warp drive expedition. That disappearance had left a lasting impact on his family. His father had inherited the heartbreak, the restless sense of longing for something beyond Earth's comfortable horizons. As for Ethan, he had only hazy memories of a kindly old man with laughter in his eyes and the faint smell of burnt wires from his workshop. "No trace was ever found," Ethan said quietly, voice taut. "There were rumors, theories, but nothing tangible." Zevran nodded slowly. "Your grandfather, Victor Drake, did not perish. He was found adrift near Velyria, rescued by the royal flotilla under King Malric's command, and served as the king's chief advisor for many years, until the day he passed." Ethan took a step back, feeling an odd mix of relief, confusion, and sorrow coil around him. He's gone. His mortal shell has succumbed to time," the alien replied softly, "but not before he wove a destiny for his lineage. Before King Malric also passed into the cosmic beyond, he decreed that you, Ethan Drake, would assume the position once held by your grandfather. By royal edict, you are to be the guardian, and in time, the consort to the 4 princesses of Velyria. This is the matter I have come to relay." There was a hush so profound that Ethan was sure he could hear the faint hum of the city outside. He stared at Zevran, uncomprehending. I beg your pardon," he managed eventually, feeling his voice tremble. "It is unusual, to say the least," Zevran said gently. "But you must understand that Victor Drake was beloved by the Velyrian court. King Malric trusted his counsel above all, and as the king neared his final hours, he sought to secure the future of his daughters, and, by extension, the stability of his empire." Ethan's thoughts swirled in a chaotic tempest. He pictured 4 alien princesses, regal, haughty, and likely dismissive of any primitive human. Then the phrase guardian and consort took deeper root in his mind, stirring a kind of incredulous panic. "But consort? I've never even left Earth's orbit. How could they want me?" Zevran inclined his head, the faintest whisper of sympathy in his star-like eyes. Royal decrees in Valyria are not easily undone. The king's word is law, even in death. But the princesses themselves have their own minds, their own desires, and their own reservations. However, the decree stands. You are summoned, Ethan Drake, to Valyria to fulfill the legacy left behind by Victor Drake and King Malric. Ethan looked around, as though seeking escape in the corners of his apartment. Yet he felt a pull, an uncanny sense of belonging to something greater. He cleared his throat, mustering what composure he could. When do we depart? A faint smile curved across Zevran's silver features. At once, he said softly, gesturing to the small levitating platform that hovered just outside the apartment corridor. The galaxy awaits you, Ethan Drake. The transport ship that whisked Ethan away from Earth's orbit was unlike any he had ever seen. Sleek and shimmering, with lines that hinted at advanced engineering beyond even the most cutting-edge Terran spacecraft, it cut through the darkness of space with barely a whisper. Long corridors of polished metal glowed with soft luminescence, and the air carried a subtle fragrance reminiscent of distant forests. Ethan's quarters were comfortable but Spartan, designed to accommodate ambassadors or dignitaries without overwhelming them with unnecessary luxury. He spent most of his journey grappling with a swirl of emotions, excitement, fear, and an undercurrent of grief for a grandfather he now realized he would never meet again. Throughout the voyage, Zevran patiently answered Ethan's questions about the wider galaxy. He spoke of the Galactic Council, a body comprised of innumerable species, some amphibious and wise, others reptilian and fierce, and still others human-like but infused with strange energies. He described cosmic conflicts and alliances, the delicate balance of trade routes, and the cultural tapestry that made up interstellar relations. But Valyria, Zevran emphasized, stood among the Council's mightiest civilizations, renowned for both its martial prowess and its refined culture. King Malric had ruled with a firm yet benevolent hand, forging alliances and fostering scientific advancements to lift Valyria to a pinnacle of prestige. And now, upon his death, the future rested on the shoulders of his 4 daughters. Princess Illyra, the eldest, known for her sharp intellect; Princess Saris, with a warrior's heart; Princess Vela, whose diplomatic skill was already earning her a devoted following; and Princess Nyx, the mysterious youngest, whose gifts in the arcane sciences were whispered about with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Ethan often pictured these princesses in his mind, wondering how they would receive him. Would they resent his intrusion, placed upon them by an ancient decree? Would they scorn him as a relic of an inferior planet? Yet, he resolved to uphold his grandfather's name and meet them with the best of his ability, no matter the cost. The throne room was a breathtaking study in artistry and power. Tall, arched windows let in beams of sunlight that refracted into dazzling patterns upon the polished marble floor. Pillars shaped like entwined serpents supported a high, vaulted ceiling, and precious stones in countless hues studded the surfaces, creating an impression that the stars themselves had chosen to dwell within these halls. At the far end of the throne room, upon a dais flanked by stately guardians, stood 4 figures of undeniable grace. Ethan's pulse quickened as he realized these were the princesses. Their royal attire blended function and fashion, tunics and flowing robes with intricate designs that hinted at their individual roles and personalities. Princess Illyra, the eldest, wore a robe of pale silver, and her short, platinum hair framed an angular face. Her gaze was sharp with intellect, and she regarded Ethan with a measured appraisal. Princess Saris was clad in a sleeveless tunic of charcoal and gold, revealing toned arms etched with swirling tattoos that gleamed faintly. She stood at attention like a warrior prepared for inspection. Princess Vela wore a regal dress of midnight blue, embroidered with star motifs. She had an elegance that suggested diplomacy, and her expression held a neutral, carefully schooled composure. Princess Nyx, the youngest, stood slightly apart from her sisters, robed in a deep violet that shimmered with arcane symbols. She was slender, and her dark hair, pulled back with a jeweled clasp, fell gracefully over her shoulders. Her eyes were curious, and just a touch uneasy. Silence fell across the hall as Lady Renora stepped forward, voice carrying with ceremonial weight. "Your Highnesses, May I present Ethan Drake of Earth, grandson of Victor Drake, who by royal decree of the late King Malric, has been summoned to serve as guardian to the royal line, and in future, to be consort by the will of the crown. A faint rustle of disapproval seemed to pass through at least one of the princesses. Cerys, the warrior, folded her arms, tilting her chin up in a gesture that could only be described as challenge. Aelira's brows drew together in quiet skepticism. Vaila's posture was impeccably neutral, though her lips pursed ever so slightly. Nyx cast her gaze to the side, her expression flickering with something like discomfort. In the hush, Ethan summoned what courage he could. "Your Highnesses," he said with a respectful bow, "I stand before you with humility. I never had the privilege of meeting King Malric, nor truly knowing my grandfather. I hope to honor their memory, and to serve Valyria in whatever way I can." The sisters exchanged glances. At last, Aelira, with her calm and authoritative air, spoke. "Earth is a relatively new member of the Galactic Council. We have no quarrel with your people, though some Valyrians remain skeptical of your species' readiness for advanced alliances." Cerys snorted softly. "No quarrel, indeed, but little more than that, either. You have arrived at a tumultuous time, human. Our father's passing has left a vacuum. The factions in the outer provinces question the future of our throne. And now you arrive, an untested outsider. Yet we are told by the king's final decree that you hold a rightful place at our side." Her tone bristled with challenge, and Ethan felt a stab of anxiety, though he tried not to show it. "I came here only by his will," he said gently. "I ask only for the chance to prove myself." Princess Vaila spoke, her voice cultured and poised. "The question is not merely your willingness, but your capability. In Valyria, worthiness is not assumed. It must be earned." Ethan inclined his head. "Then let me earn it, Your Highness." During this exchange, Princess Nyx remained mostly silent, her gaze occasionally flickering to her sisters, as though measuring their reactions. A subtle tension in the line of her shoulders betrayed her own uncertainties. Finally, Aelira drew a measured breath. "Thus begins your trials, Ethan Drake," she said in a formal tone. "In ancient times, guardians of the royal line underwent challenges of mind, of body, and of spirit to prove themselves worthy. Your presence here as consort will demand no less." Lady Renora stepped forward to speak again. "We shall make all the necessary arrangements. For the moment, I suggest you rest from your journey. Your quarters have been prepared." With a swirl of her cloak, she escorted Ethan out of the throne room. As he turned to follow, he caught the faintest trace of complex emotions in the princess's expressions: disdain, curiosity, apprehension. One thing was certain. He had just stepped into a realm of possibility that could shape not only his future, but the destiny of two worlds. Ethan's assigned quarters overlooked a courtyard of crystalline fountains. In the center of the courtyard rose a towering sculpture shaped like a stylized phoenix, carved from some translucent mineral that glowed from within. He gazed at it, letting the subdued gurgle of running water soothe his nerves. The palace environment, for all its grandeur, felt weighty with expectation. It was nearly dusk when Lady Renora came to him with a formal summons. She guided him through a series of hushed corridors, each richly decorated with embossed panels depicting ancient Velyrian myths, cosmic dragons, starborn heroes, and the forging of the first royal crown from meteorite ore. At length, they arrived at a circular chamber with walls composed of concentric crystal rings that shimmered in the torchlight. Seated around a grand table were the four princesses, along with high-ranking courtiers and officials. A hush fell as Ethan approached. Aelira arose with quiet dignity. "Ethan Drake, you stand before the High Council of Valyria. In accordance with royal tradition, you shall undergo a series of trials to assess your worthiness to stand beside the heirs of this realm. These trials are not a mere formality. In our civilization, competence, courage, and wisdom are demanded of those who would protect the royal lineage." Cerys, seated beside her sister, tapped her fingers upon the table, a restless cadence. "There will be a test of martial skill, though I doubt you have been trained in the ways of our blade arts. Nevertheless, we shall see if you possess the spirit of a warrior." Vaila gave Cerys a sidelong glance, then addressed Ethan politely. "There will also be a test of diplomacy, where you must navigate the currents of Valyrian court life. You will be placed in a scenario that requires negotiation, understanding of alien customs, and the deft touch of a statesman. Nyx, who had been silent, spoke with a voice that was soft yet echoed strangely in the acoustic chamber. Lastly, you must face a trial of the mind, of knowledge and resourcefulness. Our father believed that the guardian of Valyria's royal line must be able to solve the greatest mysteries of our age, or at least show the potential to grow into such a role. Aelira's eyes softened slightly, though her tone remained formal. We do this not to torment you, but to ensure that the king's decree aligns with your true capabilities. Should you fail, the edict may be reversed. But if you succeed, you will stand in a position of rare privilege and burden. Ethan nodded, summoning courage to still the flutter within his chest. I accept these trials, he said, voice steady. Whatever it takes, I will face them. A night passed while preparations for the trials began. Ethan used the time to acquaint himself with palace life, meeting advisors, and immersing himself in the history and traditions of Valyria. Though many courtiers eyed him with suspicion, a few showed subtle kindness, offering him glimpses into the political landscape that swirled around the throne. In clandestine moments, he discovered that not all was well in the kingdom. Whispers spoke of discontent among certain noble houses, of rumors that one of the princesses might abdicate her claim to rule, or that a powerful general in the Velyrian military coveted a seat at the council. Darker rumors floated about as well, of assassins lurking in the palace corridors, alliances with hostile star empires, and a growing tension that threatened the fragile stability King Malric had labored to maintain. One evening, as Ethan tried to navigate a labyrinthine hallway, he found himself outside a gilded arch that opened onto an ornate library. Glowing orbs floated near the ceiling, illuminating countless scrolls and data tablets. Rows of crystal shelves bore tomes that seemed older than Earth's recorded history. At a table, near one window sat Princess Velyria, reading a slender volume. She looked up at Ethan's approach, and he glimpsed a flicker of curiosity cross her refined features. "Forgive me, Your Highness," he said softly, considering whether he should retreat. "I was exploring, and I didn't expect to find you here." She watched him for a moment, as though weighing possibilities. Then, with quiet grace, she closed her book. "It is no intrusion. Come, sit if you like." Grateful for the tentative acceptance, Ethan approached. The library smelled faintly of exotic ink and ancient parchment. He took a seat across from her, carefully lowering himself onto a slender stool carved from the same translucent crystal that seemed so prevalent in Valyria's architecture. "How are you adjusting to palace life?" Velyria inquired. Her tone was diplomatic, but there was an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. "It's overwhelming, at times," Ethan admitted. "Your culture is so refined, so different from Earth's. I worry I'll commit a grave faux pas without even realizing it." Valyria's lips curved in a small smile. "A valid concern. Valyria does have many protocols, but sincerity can go a long way in bridging such gaps." Ethan ventured cautiously. "And you, Princess Velyria, how do you feel about your father's decree? Do you share Cerys's skepticism about me?" Velyria studied him carefully. "I do not resent you personally, if that is what you mean. But we cannot ignore the magnitude of this arrangement. If you succeed in your trials, it could shape our entire lineage. That is not a small matter." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand. I want only to do right by your people, and by my grandfather's memory. If there's anything you could advise me, anything that might help me prepare, I would be grateful." Velyria hesitated, then rose from her seat. "Perhaps there is. Walk with me." She guided him to a side chamber in the library where a large mosaic, crafted of thousands of tiny gems, depicted an ancient Velyrian king receiving a gift of starlight from a cosmic entity. Velyria gestured to the mosaic, her expression thoughtful. "This is said to depict the moment our ancestors gained knowledge of the cosmos from a being beyond the known galaxy. It's a fable, perhaps, but it holds truth. The true strength of our people lies in our willingness to learn from others, even if they are not of our race, or perhaps not of our realm at all." Ethan followed her gaze, feeling a flutter of awe. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Valyria's gaze slid back to Ethan. "The princesses are not of one mind regarding you. Aelira seeks to uphold tradition, yet she is open to rational argument. Ceres is proud and values martial skill above all. She will only respect those who can best her, or at least challenge her. Nyx is complicated. She delves into mysteries that few comprehend. What of you? Ethan asked softly, turning to face Velyria directly. What do you value? She paused, placing a hand lightly against the mosaic. I value unity. I have negotiated with countless envoys, forging alliances and treaties that some said were impossible. I believe in bridging differences, but I also value wisdom. One must know when to yield and when to stand firm. Show me you have the wisdom to navigate these trials without sowing further discord. That is how you can earn my respect. Ethan inclined his head. I will do my best, he promised. Velyria gave a subtle nod. Then you have taken the first step. The morning of the first trial arrived with a golden haze draped over the palace. Ethan had hardly slept. The promise of a martial test loomed over him like a storm cloud. Training in Earth's self-defense classes could not possibly compare to the martial arts of a starfaring empire. Yet, he had no choice but to face Ceres's challenge head-on. The sun rose higher, and Ethan was summoned to an open-air coliseum within the palace grounds. High walls of carved marble rose around a sandy arena, ringed by stands where courtiers and guards observed. Towering columns, etched with scenes of historical battles, supported a canopy of woven vines and shimmering crystals. At the center of the arena stood Princess Ceres, her athletic frame clad in a sleek, dark tunic. She wore gauntlets and boots made from a strange alloy that glinted faintly in the sun, and at her hip, she carried a slender sword whose blade radiated faint pulses of energy. You arrive at last, she greeted, voice carrying a palpable edge. I was beginning to think Earth's champion might hide away. Ethan forced a grin. Wouldn't dream of missing our appointment. A hush fell as they took positions across from each other in the arena's center. Ceres lifted her sword, the tip tracing delicate patterns in the air. We shall begin with a test of combat skill. Though we will not fight to the death, you should not expect mercy. Prove your mettle, or be prepared to yield. Ethan's heart pounded. He had been issued a training sword constructed of neutral alloys, less dangerous than Ceres's blade, but still capable of dealing a decisive blow if handled well. He drew it, feeling the unfamiliar weight in his hand. Ceres wasted no time. She swept forward with fluid grace, launching a feint to his left before pivoting into a direct thrust toward his torso. Ethan barely managed to parry in time, the shock of the blade's impact vibrating up his arm. He retreated, trying to maintain his footing in the loose sand. She pressed on, her movements precise, relentless. Like a dancer, she wove arcs of steel around him, forcing him to defend desperately. More than once, he saw a glimmer of derision in her eyes, as though she found his earthbound techniques clumsy. But Ethan recalled the few lessons he'd gleaned from simulation training in the ship's small VR module on his journey here. He forced himself to stay calm, analyzing her pattern. He noticed she often initiated with a high thrust, then circled to exploit his flank. The next time she moved in, he managed a well-timed parry followed by a swift counterstrike that actually forced her to sidestep. A spark of surprise lit Ceres's face. There's some spirit in you after all, she said, her tone grudgingly respectful. The clash continued, swords ringing in the morning air. Sweat beaded on Ethan's brow, and his arms began to ache from her unrelenting onslaught. Ceres moved with a speed and power that outstripped him, but he had cunning and the element of unpredictability. Once, he feigned a stumble, baiting her to lunge. She took it, and he managed a glancing blow on her armor. It wasn't enough to incapacitate her, but it earned him a brief nod of acknowledgement. Around them, the assembled nobles and guards watched with tense interest. Ethan even glimpsed Velyria, Velyria, and Nyx standing on a balcony overlooking the arena. Velyria's expression was thoughtful, Velyria's appeared concerned, and Nyx stared with an unreadable intensity, as though analyzing every detail. I can't match Ceres in raw skill, Ethan thought desperately. I have to find some other way. Ceres lunged again, and Ethan sidestepped, locking blades with hers. For an instant, they stood almost face to face, swords grinding. Ceres's eyes burned with fierce determination. Is that all you've got, Terran? She hissed, pressing forward. With a grunt of effort, Ethan pivoted, aiming to use her momentum against her. He twisted his torso, trying to throw her off balance. But she was too strong, too fast. She wrenched her sword free and struck him across the shoulder with a flat blow that sent him sprawling to the sand, gasping for breath. Before he could scramble up, her blade glowed inches from his neck, the hum of its energies crackling in the tense air. Ethan froze, chest heaving. Saris gazed down at him, chest rising and falling with her own rapid breaths. "Yield, or be finished," she demanded. Time seemed to slow. Fear warred with pride, and for a moment, Ethan felt the sting of defeat. Yet, in the corner of his vision, he caught sight of Vaila's worried expression. He saw Alira's stoic gaze, Nyx's inscrutable stare, the watchful eyes of all those around him. He let the sword slip from his grasp, raising his hands in surrender. "I yield." A faint sigh passed through the stands as Saris lowered her blade. She offered Ethan a hand, and he took it, allowing her to help him to his feet. Though her words were terse, her tone held a grudging hint of respect. "You fought more skillfully than I expected. You lack discipline, but you have heart. Perhaps that spark could be fanned into a flame. We shall see." Ethan nodded, swallowing the ache of his bruised ego. "Thank you," he murmured, deciding that grace in defeat was better than empty bravado. Despite Ethan's official loss, word spread that he had held his own against Princess Saris for far longer than anyone anticipated. Some courtiers, who had scoffed at him behind closed doors, began to speak in hushed tones of this Terran who refused to be a mere pushover. But not all were impressed. In the days following the trial, he began to notice subtle slights in certain corners of the court. Nobles who would whisper behind their ornate fans or quietly scorn him at formal gatherings. Some saw him as an outsider who would disrupt Velyrian inheritance with foreign influences. Others believed he might be a puppet, easily manipulated by those who truly sought to control the throne. Tensions within the palace escalated, especially as rumors of an assassination attempt on one of the princesses began to swirl. Night patrols doubled, and every corner bristled with watchful eyes. Ethan found himself glancing over his shoulder more often, acutely aware that a single misstep could lead to a deadly confrontation. In one of the palace's labyrinthine gardens, Ethan stumbled upon Princess Nyx, seemingly lost in her thoughts. She was studying an ancient statue carved from black, glass-like stone that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Strange runes were etched across its surface. Nyx turned her head as he approached. Her eyes, a luminous dark hue, flickered with caution. "You walk quietly, Ethan Drake." "Apologies," he replied, halting at a respectful distance. "I didn't mean to intrude." She regarded him silently, then gestured to the statue. "This relic predates our recorded history. It's said to resonate with cosmic energies from beyond the known galaxy. My father entrusted its care to me, believing my studies in the arcane would glean truths that might protect Valyria." Ethan frowned, stepping closer to examine the runes. "I'm afraid I can't decipher any of it. Few can. Even among my people, knowledge of these symbols has been lost." She paused, tracing her slender fingers over the carved lines. "But I sense an awakening. The energies here have grown restless since Father's passing. I fear it may be connected to threats within and beyond our borders." He studied her delicate features, noticing the flicker of anxiety that her calm demeanor could not entirely hide. "You think someone might use this power for harm?" Nyx's gaze drifted to him, cautious yet searching. "Perhaps. The relic could be harnessed as a conduit for destructive forces, or it may be part of a larger puzzle. We stand at a crossroads, and if the wrong hands manipulate this knowledge, it could threaten not just Valyria, but all who are aligned with us, even your Earth." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "Is there any way to safeguard it?" Nyx exhaled, a hint of vulnerability showing in her eyes. "That is my burden to bear. The question is, should I stand alone? My sisters have their roles. Saris with her sword, Alira with her keen intellect, Vaila with her diplomacy. I have my arcane arts. I do not know if you, a Terran, can help me, but I sense your grandfather's spirit resonates within you, even if you do not realize it yet." Ethan took a measured breath. "If there's anything I can do, I promise you I'll try. You might find Earth folk can be resourceful in ways you wouldn't expect." Nyx regarded him for a moment, an almost imperceptible softening in her expression. "We shall see. Remember, your next trials will test more than just the steel in your hands. And there are those in this palace who would see you fail, or worse." Ethan nodded. Thank you for the warning. She merely inclined her head, then turned to leave, her dark robe blending into the shadows of the garden. Left alone with the ancient statue, Ethan studied it for a moment longer. He could not read the runes, but he sensed a faint pulse beneath his fingertips when he brushed the smooth stone, a subtle vibration, like a distant heartbeat echoing across eons. Days later, Ethan found himself in the Hall of Assembly, a sprawling chamber filled with representatives of the noble houses, each seeking to voice their concerns in the lead-up to the official coronation of the next monarch. Princess Velyria, decked in stately attire, stood at the forefront, prepared to arbitrate a matter involving contested trade routes near the outer rim of Velyrian territory. According to tradition, the prospective guardian consort was required to assist in mediating a dispute to demonstrate the ability to navigate Velyrian politics. Velyria explained the situation to Ethan in hushed tones before the assembly commenced. Two families, the House of Callus and the House of Velyrian, claimed exclusive rights to a newly discovered resource-rich asteroid belt. Tensions ran high, with each accusing the other of sabotage and subterfuge. Your role, Velyria murmured, is to act as an impartial voice, a mediator who can propose solutions neither side has considered. Be mindful, the House of Callus is prone to fiery outbursts, while the House of Velyrian prides itself on cunning diplomacy. Ethan's heart fluttered with nerves. Negotiating with this many watchful alien lords was far beyond any business meeting he had encountered on Earth. Yet he had to try. The grand doors opened, and the scions of both houses entered, each retinue bristling with subtle hostility. Princess Velyria, observing from a raised platform, tapped a small chime to signal the start of proceedings. Velyria, as lead mediator, offered formal greetings and then yielded the floor to Ethan. He cleared his throat, addressing the assembly. Honored representatives, thank you for allowing me to speak. I hail from Earth, where resource disputes often lead to prolonged conflict if not handled with fairness and creativity. Let us first lay out the facts so that we might find a balanced approach. Baron Callus, a tall, sinewy figure with a hawk-like visage, spoke in a clipped tone. The asteroid belt is within territory historically explored by my house. Our claim is clear. House Velyrian has trespassed. Lady Velyrian, elegant and draped in scarlet robes, countered sharply. Your sensors are faulty, Baron. Our scouts have documented the region for decades. Your abrupt intrusion suggests an intent to seize what is not yours. A heated exchange ensued, with each side brandishing data tablets to substantiate their claims. Ethan felt sweat bead at his temples. He cast a glance at Velyria, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. Sifting through conflicting evidence, Ethan identified small overlaps in their documentation, points that might form a basis for compromise. When the barbs subsided momentarily, he cleared his throat again, stepping forward. It seems both houses have legitimate arguments. Baron Callus's expedition logs show initial scans, but Lady Velyrian's data reveals continuous monitoring. Perhaps we can establish a joint commission, funded by both houses, to further explore the belt and determine resource allocation. Revenues from the belt could then be shared proportionally, based on each house's documented investment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Baron sniffed. You suggest we concede partial rights? Not concede, Ethan said patiently, but collaborate. Sharing risk often leads to shared reward. Neither side truly benefits if this escalates to open conflict or sabotage. Velyria thrives when its houses unite for mutual gain. Lady Velyrian arched a brow. Joint exploitation? It has been attempted in the past, but is fraught with mistrust. Indeed, which is why oversight from the crown would be required. Ethan continued. Representatives from the royal court can mediate disputes in real time, ensuring transparency. If necessary, the watchful eye of the throne can enforce compliance. Princess Velyria stepped in smoothly. An equitable approach, if both parties genuinely desire to avoid open hostilities. Would the houses consider a treaty stipulating shared research, profit division, and a moratorium on unilateral expansion until an official boundary is agreed upon? At first, the two sides displayed reluctance. But as the debate raged, it became clear that Ethan's plan, formulated with Velyria's guiding hand, was one of the few plausible solutions. Eventually, With careful negotiation and guarantees of accountability, both houses agreed in principle. Observers in the Hall of Assembly appeared impressed by the outcome. When the session concluded, Velyrian turned to Ethan with a gentle smile. "Well done," she praised quietly. "You've shown adaptability and reason. It bodes well for the next stage of your trials." From her vantage point, Velyrian surveyed the chamber, a pensive expression on her face. She offered Ethan a slight nod of acknowledgement before turning away, as if silently marking his progress. That evening, as Ethan retired to his quarters, he was intercepted by a hooded figure in a secluded corridor. Instinctive alarm raced through him, but the figure lifted their hands in a gesture of peace. "Ethan Drake, a word, if you please." The voice hissed quietly, distorted by a small device at the throat. Ethan's heart pounded. "Who are you?" "An ally of sorts. One who prefers to remain hidden for now. You must know that not everyone in the palace supports your ascension, nor that of all 4 princesses." Ethan frowned. "I suspected as much. But who would benefit from opposing them?" The hooded figure cast a furtive glance down the corridor. "Dark forces coalesce. There are factions who believe Velyrian should open direct negotiations with powers the late king deemed too dangerous to contact, species that lurk on the borders of our galaxy. They see the monarchy as stagnant, and your presence as a threat to their plans. Why come to me? You may not trust me, but heed my warning. Watch the princesses, especially Nyx. Her studies in the arcane arts draw unwanted attention. There are those who would manipulate her gifts for personal gain. Protect her, if you can." Before Ethan could press for more, the figure glided away, melting into the shadows. He stood alone in the corridor, adrenaline surging. A swirl of thoughts and suspicion churned in his mind, leaving him to wonder how he could possibly guard all 4 princesses, and himself, from dangers that lurked unseen. The day of the final formal test dawned. A message arrived early in Ethan's quarters, summoning him to the Hall of Astral Contemplation. He dressed in the best garments provided to him, simple yet stately robes of midnight blue, reminiscent of the star-laden sky Earth once gazed upon in wonder. The Hall of Astral Contemplation was a circular room at the palace's highest spire, surrounded by transparent walls that offered a breathtaking panorama of Velyria's capital. Soft cushions arranged in a ring encircled a single, raised pedestal that supported a crystalline orb shimmering with prismatic light. Princess Velyrian, typically poised and analytical, stood by the pedestal, a data tablet in hand. Princess Saris leaned against a pillar, arms folded, while Velyrian stood thoughtfully near one of the panoramic windows. Princess Nyx was absent at first, but she soon arrived, clad in a robe adorned with arcane symbols, her expression guarded. Velyrian turned to address Ethan. "This orb," she began, gesturing with the stylus of her tablet, "represents the culmination of our father's philosophical studies. Velyrian has long valued not just martial prowess and diplomacy, but also intellectual curiosity and insight. For this trial, you will be tested on your capacity to solve complex problems under pressure." Ethan swallowed hard. "What manner of problems?" Saris smirked slightly. "You'll see. Each princess will pose a riddle or puzzle," Velyrian explained, reflecting her individual domain of expertise. "You must respond with at least a partial solution or a demonstration of understanding. Do not despair if you cannot solve each puzzle entirely, for even knowledge of one's own ignorance is a form of wisdom. Are you prepared?" "Yes," Ethan said, clasping his hands behind his back to hide a slight tremor. Velyrian went first. She manipulated the orb, causing it to glow with shifting patterns of light. "Our father studied cosmic gravitational phenomena. Imagine 2 celestial bodies locked in mutual orbit. One is significantly more massive, the other relatively small. Yet they remain in equilibrium. How might a third body, introduced to the system, destabilize that balance, and under what conditions could a new stable arrangement be formed?" Ethan drew a deep breath, calling upon half-remembered physics lectures. He spoke of orbital resonance, perturbation thresholds, and the ways gravitational interactions shift over time. Velyrian's neutral expression gradually relaxed as she realized Ethan had at least a basic grasp of astrophysical concepts. Though he could not provide a fully rigorous solution, he reasoned through possibilities of how a third body might achieve a stable Lagrange point or cause orbital decay. A faint smile touched Alira's lips when he finished. Next, Sarah stepped forward. Instead of a riddle of words, she traced a pattern on the orb, causing a holographic projection to appear, a schematic of a starship's shield generator with missing components. The shield is under attack from 3 different types of energy weapons: plasma bursts, electromagnetic pulses, and particle beams. How do you allocate limited power among the generator's subroutines to best protect the ship? Ethan scrutinized the diagram. Despite not being an engineer, he reasoned out that each weapon type required a specific frequency or layering in the shield, factoring in how the pulses and beams might overlap in time. He proposed an adaptive algorithm that shifted power allocation in near real time based on sensor readings. Saris frowned thoughtfully, then nodded once, acknowledging he had offered a plausible approach. Vaila took her turn, and the orb displayed a stylized scenario: multiple territories, each with distinct resources and mutual dependencies. In this puzzle, each territory can trade with certain neighbors, but alliances and enmities shift unpredictably. Propose a framework that ensures the flow of goods continues despite rivalries. Here, Ethan drew from Earth's history of trade deals and conflict resolution. He suggested implementing rotating neutral zones managed by a council of unbiased mediators, with a bartering system that guaranteed each territory access to resources in exchange for peaceful negotiations. Vaila's eyes glimmered with approval. Finally, Nyx approached. The orb darkened, then showed lines of cryptic symbols that appeared reminiscent of the runes on the black statue in the garden. "Decode this sequence," she said softly. "It is an ancient cipher, believed to unlock hidden knowledge. Interpret its meaning if you can." Ethan's heart thumped. He stared at the arcane glyphs. Logic alone would not suffice here. He recalled the faint pulse he'd felt from that statue, the hush that seemed to connect across centuries. He hesitated, then ventured a guess. The symbol sets repeat in a cyclical pattern, perhaps indicating a message about transformation or renewal. Some shapes mirror cosmic alignments, while others echo basic star maps. It could be referencing a prophecy of alignment, when certain stars or galaxies come into conjunction. Nyx watched him intently. And what would that conjunction signify? That a gateway might open? A path to knowledge once lost? Ethan said, half in wonder, half in uncertainty. "I can't be certain, but it suggests a cycle in which our galaxy intersects with cosmic energies that could bring great change or great peril." A hush fell. Nyx's expression grew pensive. "An intriguing interpretation. I sense you have glimpsed a thread of truth, even if you do not fully grasp it." She placed a hand upon the orb, and the glyphs vanished, leaving the crystal shimmering faintly. Alira stepped forward again, raising her voice. "Thus ends the trial of the mind. You have not failed, Ethan Drake." A wave of relief washed over him, though he remained keenly aware that the princess's approval was only the first step. He had proven himself capable of reasoning, but the final verdict on his guardianship was yet to be delivered. That very evening, the palace held a modest ceremony to acknowledge Ethan's completion of the 3 principal trials. He felt weary but relieved, aware that he had at least demonstrated some competency in each domain. The princesses were present, as well as many courtiers and officials. Small golden cups of spiced wine were passed among the assembly. Ethan accepted his with a nod of thanks, the liquid fragrant and warm against the crystal cup. But as he lifted it to his lips, he caught a sharp, chemical tang on the rim, something that didn't match the usual floral aroma. Alarm flared. He discreetly lowered the cup, heart pounding. Poison? He had no proof, yet every instinct shrieked caution. Searching the crowd, he spotted a glimmer of interest from a cloaked figure, but then it vanished behind a pillar. Ethan approached Saris, who stood near a fountain, sipping her own wine. "Princess," he said in a low voice, "I suspect my cup may be poisoned. Please don't drink any more of yours." Her eyes flickered dangerously, and she sniffed her cup. A moment later, she shot him a sharp look. "You sense something off?" He nodded. "I can't be certain, but—" She didn't wait. She grabbed his cup from him, then dipped a small sensor wand into the liquid. The device beeped ominously, turning a sickly green. Saris's hand tightened around the cup. "You were right. The substance is lethal to humans." She inhaled, testing her own drink. "Thankfully, mine is clean." Alarm spread through the chamber as word of the attempted poisoning quickly circulated. Guards roared into action, scanning each visitor's drink. Princesses Vayla and Nyx convened hurriedly with the palace security. Alyra strode to Ethan's side, her face ashen. "This is a direct attack within our walls," she muttered. "I fear a conspiracy runs deeper than we realized." Ethan's mind raced. Could it be connected to the rumor of an assassination plot? If they can't kill the princesses directly, perhaps they target me to weaken them, or to defy King Malric's decree. Alyra nodded grimly. "Rest assured, we will not let this stand. But we must tread carefully, lest we provoke a confrontation with an unseen enemy." Saris placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Her tone held more warmth than he had previously heard from her. "You have proven your worth in the arena and now survived an attempt on your life. Perhaps you are stronger than I gave you credit for, Ethan Drake." Despite the tension of the moment, Ethan appreciated her acknowledgement. "Thank you, Princess," he said quietly, casting a wary glance over the crowd. "Let's hope that strength holds out." That night, the palace was a hive of restless activity. Guards prowled the corridors in groups, scanning every nook and cranny for threats. The princesses discreetly retreated to safer quarters, each with a contingent of loyal protectors. Sleep was impossible for Ethan. He paced his chamber, mind churning with questions and fears. As the hours passed, he recalled the hooded figure's cryptic warning to watch Nyx. "Dark forces coalesce," the voice had said. Anxiety gnawed at him. He resolved to check on the youngest princess to ensure her safety. Stealing quietly into the corridors, he made his way to the wing of the palace where Nyx's chambers lay. Torches cast flickering light upon the walls. A hush pervaded. Reaching Nyx's doors, he found them slightly ajar. A chill clawed at his insides. He pushed the door gently, stepping into a dimly lit room filled with swirling motes of arcane light. Nyx's personal study, lined with ancient texts and relics. At the center stood Nyx, facing an imposing figure garbed in dark robes. The figure's features were partially concealed by a metallic mask inscribed with ominous runes. A crackling aura of energy flickered around the masked intruder, who seemed to be speaking in hushed tones to the princess. "You must see reason," the stranger hissed. "Your power dwarfs that of your sisters. The statue in the garden is but a gateway, a key to an alliance that will make Velyria invincible. Join me." Nyx's voice trembled with both fear and anger. "I will not betray my father's memory, nor risk unleashing cosmic terrors upon our world. Begone." The intruder raised a gloved hand, emitting a surge of strange energy that flared dangerously close to Nyx. She summoned a shimmering shield of arcane force to block the attack, but the collision sent her staggering back. Ethan's blood roared in his ears. Without hesitation, he rushed forward, grabbing a decorative staff from the wall. He thrust it between the intruder and Nyx, hoping to disrupt the barrage of energy. Sparks flew, and a wave of force knocked him off his feet. The masked stranger snarled, "You dare interfere, Terran?" Staggering to his knees, Ethan brandished the staff like a crude spear. "You'll have to go through me." Nyx raised her arms, chanting in a melodic yet powerful cadence. A swirling glyph materialized above her, and threads of violet energy twisted around her hands. The masked figure lunged for her, but Ethan interposed himself again, taking a glancing blow of crackling energy across his arm. Pain tore through him, nearly causing him to drop the staff. Seeing Ethan's resilience, Nyx unleashed her spell. A surge of arcs, purple lightning that seemed infused with starlight, enveloped the masked figure, pinning them in place. Smoke rose from the intruder's robes as they writhed. With a desperate snarl, the stranger hurled one last bolt of energy at Nyx, but Ethan dove in front of her, raising the staff as a shield. The impact shattered the staff and drove him to the ground, pain exploding across his body. When the light cleared, the masked figure was gone, vanished into some rift or teleportation device. Nyx knelt beside Ethan, eyes wide with alarm. "Ethan, can you stand?" He coughed, trying to steady his breathing. "I think so." Every nerve in his body still tingled with leftover energy. Guards, alerted by the commotion, poured into the chamber, weapons drawn. Saris, Alyra, and Vayla soon followed, their expressions a mix of shock and outrage at the chaos they found. Nyx helped Ethan to his feet. "He saved me," she said, voice trembling with lingering adrenaline. That masked intruder sought to coerce me into harnessing forbidden powers. Aelira's face tightened. This conspiracy runs deeper than we feared. Vaila gently touched Ethan's burned arm. We must get him to the healers. Saris glowered at the spot where the masked intruder had disappeared. Next time, they won't escape. Ethan's vision swam. The last thing he recalled was Nyx's concerned face as darkness closed in. When Ethan awoke, he found himself in the palace infirmary, a high-ceilinged chamber lined with advanced medical devices and softly glowing crystals that provided healing frequencies. His arm was swathed in a band of shimmering salve that tingled as it repaired the damaged tissue. Standing at his bedside were the princesses, Elira with her analytical poise, Saris with subdued restlessness, Vaila with quiet concern, and Nyx with barely concealed guilt in her eyes. Ethan struggled to sit up, only to have Vaila gently press him back down. "Easy, you've suffered a severe energy burn," she said softly. Aelira studied Ethan with something akin to admiration. "Your intervention saved Nyx. We cannot overlook that fact." Saris gave a brisk nod. "I owe you an apology, Terran. I questioned your worthiness, yet you have shown more courage than many seasoned warriors." Nyx hesitated, then placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I am in your debt. That masked figure was once an advisor of my father's, rumored to be entangled in dark research. I never thought he'd go so far as to confront me directly." Ethan managed to smile despite the pain. "I'm just glad I arrived in time." The princesses exchanged significant glances. Aelira spoke at length. "Our father's decree named you guardian, and you have embodied that role with honor. Therefore, by the authority vested in us as his heirs, we confirm your position. You shall serve as guardian to the royal line, with the potential to become consort if all parties are in accord." Despite the throbbing in his arm, Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you," he said simply. Vaila added in a measured tone, "Of course, the path ahead will not be without complications. The conspirators who tried to poison you, the masked figure who attacked Nyx, these dangers remain. But together, we stand a better chance of protecting Velyria." Saris extended a hand in an uncharacteristic gesture of camaraderie. Ethan clasped it, feeling her calloused palm. "If you ever wish to hone your combat skills further," she muttered, "seek me out. A real fight is looming, not just training bouts." Aelira's cool gaze swept the room. "In the days to come, we must unite our strengths. Ethan, your unique perspective as an Earthborn citizen might prove invaluable. This is the beginning of a new chapter for Velyria." Nyx lingered as the others began to leave. She lowered her voice, whispering to Ethan, "Those runes you interpreted during the trial, they speak of a cosmic alignment that could be harnessed for great good or unspeakable evil. We may need your help to ensure the latter does not come to pass." Ethan met her intense gaze, heart thudding. "I'll help any way I can." She gave him a solemn nod, then followed her sisters out of the infirmary, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. Despite the searing ache in his arm, a steadfast resolve burned brighter than ever in his heart. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the official coronation of the new monarch accelerated. Traditionally, the eldest child would ascend, making Aelira queen. Yet, palace insiders whispered that each princess bore unique qualities that could benefit the throne. Some argued Saris's martial skill was needed in these uncertain times. Others championed Vaila's diplomatic acumen, while still others claimed Nyx's arcane prowess could guide Velyria into a new era of cosmic understanding. Ethan witnessed each sister grappling with the weight of destiny. They gathered in private meetings, discussing the possibility of rotating leadership or forming a council of siblings. However, tradition demanded a single monarch bear the crown. Meanwhile, security tightened. Guards patrolled the corridors in pairs. Every corner of the palace watched meticulously. Multiple attempts to identify the masked figure ended in frustration. Whoever it was, they had either fled Velyria or possessed a means of remaining unseen. One day, Ethan was summoned by Aelira to a sealed chamber deep beneath the palace. The walls glowed with a faint, blue luminescence, and in the center rested a stone dais bearing a crystalline sword. A circle of glyphs surrounded it, humming with dormant energy. Saris, Vaila, and Nyx stood on one side, while Aelira beckoned Ethan to stand across from them. This is the blade of celestial accord, Illyra explained quietly. Forged in our distant past, it represents unity among the heirs. By tradition, the prospective monarch draws the blade during their coronation ceremony, signifying they alone are chosen to lead. Sarah stepped forward. But times have changed. We have decided to share in this moment together, to see if the blade can be drawn by all, or if it selects one of us. Velyrian placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. We do this not to contest each other, but to witness how fate guides our family. Nyx turned to Ethan. Stand as witness, guardian. Your presence also matters, for you carry the legacy of Victor Drake. Touched by their trust, Ethan nodded. One by one, the princesses approached the dais. Illyra went first, resting her hand on the sword's hilt. She closed her eyes, murmuring a short incantation. The glyphs surrounding the dais glowed, but the sword did not budge. Illyra exhaled and stepped back. Saris tried next, gripping the hilt with determination. Though her expression tightened with effort, the blade remained immovable. Velyrian approached with calm composure, but met the same result. Finally, Nyx placed her slender hand upon the hilt, a slight tremor passing through her. The glyphs flickered brighter for a moment, then dimmed. The sword did not move. A solemn silence filled the chamber. Ethan felt his chest tighten at the weight of disappointment that settled over the four sisters. Suddenly, Nyx turned to Ethan, something akin to realization flickering in her eyes. Ethan, she breathed, place your hand upon the hilt. Our father's decree binds you to our family. Perhaps the blade must sense your presence as well. Illyra, Saris, and Velyrian exchanged uncertain glances. Yet, each nodded in turn, as though silently acknowledging that the rules might be different this time. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan approached the dais. The sword gleamed under the azure glow, beckoning him like a silent star in a dark sky. He placed his hand upon the hilt, standing beside Nyx. All at once, the glyphs erupted with radiant light, forming swirling patterns around the dais. Nyx, her hand still on the sword, gasped, and Ethan felt a surge of something, raw, cosmic energy, coursing from the dais up his arm. It was neither painful nor pleasant, but profoundly awe-inspiring, as though he touched the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. Slowly, in perfect unison, Ethan and Nyx lifted the blade. A resonant hum filled the chamber, the sword's crystalline edges refracting bursts of prismatic light. Saris let out a low whistle, eyes wide. Velyrian clasped her hands over her mouth in astonishment. Illyra stepped closer, her voice trembling with wonder. This has never happened before. Nyx, still gripping the blade with Ethan, stared at him in shock and exhilaration. It seems we are chosen, guardian. Ethan gently lowered the sword, returning it to the dais as the glyphs subsided. What does it mean? Illyra's expression was reverent. It means the monarchy is not bound by tradition alone. Our father's decree, your lineage, and Nyx's arcane affinity have combined to forge a new path. This changes everything. Saris exhaled slowly. If the blade acknowledges both of you, then perhaps the next phase of leadership requires unity in ways we have never imagined. Velyrian clasped Ethan's free hand, her eyes shining with anticipation. This could signify a joint guardianship between you and Nyx, or even among all of us. But how we interpret this will shape Velyria's future. Nyx turned to Ethan, a swirl of emotions etched on her face. Uncertainty, excitement, and something deeper that he could not immediately name. We must stand together, she whispered. For the sake of Velyria, and for the sake of all who place their trust in us. Ethan nodded, heart pounding. Whatever the path, I'll walk it at your side. Word of the sword's reaction spread rapidly through the palace. Some hailed it as a sign that Nyx should ascend the throne, with Ethan at her side as guardian consort. Others balked, fearing an unprecedented alliance of arcane and outsider influence. Meanwhile, the conspirators lurking in the shadows seized the moment of uncertainty. During the coronation eve, a night when the palace was bathed in ceremonial lights and the people of Seraphar celebrated in the streets, an attack came without warning. Columns of smoke and bursts of energy rocked the palace gates, as saboteurs unleashed advanced weaponry to create chaos. Ethan and the princesses were quickly escorted to a fortified chamber while guards rallied to repel the incursion. But the masked figure re-emerged, slipping through hidden corridors to ambush them from within. Accompanied by a small cadre of followers cloaked in darkness, the intruder confronted the princesses in a grand hallway lined with stained glass windows. "You cannot stop the tide of change," the intruder snarled. "Your monarchy is weak. Join us, Nyx. Tap into the cosmic forces you have studied. Unleash them, and claim your rightful power." Nyx lifted her chin defiantly. "Never. I'll protect Valyria, not destroy it. My father understood that true power rests in unity, not domination." The figure hurled crackling spheres of dark energy. Ethan, still bruised from prior battles, ducked behind a pillar, motioning for the princesses to seek cover. Cerys charged, sword flashing, but a wave of destructive force threw her aside. Aelira activated a defensive shield device, deflecting several blasts. Vaila tried to coordinate the guards, but the attackers pressed hard. Ethan locked eyes with Nyx. She nodded, as though reading his intent. Together, they rushed forward. Nyx chanted, summoning arcs of violet lightning that collided with the intruder's dark energy in a brilliant explosion of sparks. Meanwhile, Ethan flanked the masked figure, drawing on everything he'd learned from Cerys's training to parry a blade that hummed with malevolent power. Sparks flew, and Ethan felt the weight of the intruder's skill. Their metallic mask glowed with runic symbols, fueling their strikes with an unnatural intensity. Summoning an extra reserve of determination, Ethan pivoted, hooking the intruder's blade with his own. At the same moment, Nyx unleashed a focused torrent of arcane energy. The combined assault battered the intruder's defenses, causing cracks to appear in the swirling aura that surrounded them. With a final surge, Ethan drove his blade forward, knocking the masked figure to the ground. Nyx pinned them with tendrils of shimmering force. "Now," she demanded, "reveal yourself." A ripple coursed through the mask. Slowly, it dissolved, unveiling a gaunt, hollow-eyed man with silver hair streaked with black. A hush fell among the princesses. Recognizing him, Aelira's face paled. "Admiral Karath." Karath let out a ragged laugh, eyes gleaming with feverish zeal. "Yes, dear princess. I served your father once, but he was blinded by his own moral constraints. This galaxy is vast. Valyria could be an empire unrivaled, if we only dared to harness the darkest powers. But now, your weakness condemns us all." "Enough," Cerys growled, stepping forward. Guards, Karath's followers, seeing their leader subdued, began to flee. The guards cornered many, while others escaped into the tumult outside. Nyx maintained her arcane hold on Karath, though it visibly drained her. Aelira spoke in a voice edged with sorrow. "You were once a trusted advisor to our father. How did you come to this treason?" Karath sneered. "Your father's so-called wisdom doomed us to stagnation. I sought the keys to unlock cosmic power, but he forbade further research. Your line is not worthy of the throne, especially if it must rely on a Terran to protect it." Ethan felt a flash of anger, but refused to be goaded. He gently placed a hand on Nyx's shoulder. "Princess, no need to hurt him more than necessary." Nyx nodded, face grim. She released him from her spell. Guards promptly seized Karath, dragging him away amid protests and bitter laughter. The immediate threat neutralized, the princesses turned to survey the damage. Smoke drifted through the corridors, and distant echoes of battle still reverberated, but the palace defenses were gaining the upper hand. By sunrise, the invasion had been repelled, Karath's conspiracy laid bare. Many involved in the plot were captured, and those who escaped were pursued into the outer territories. The palace reeled from the damage, yet the people's faith in the royal line soared when news spread that the princesses, with Ethan Drake at their side, had faced the threat head-on and prevailed. In the great courtyard, under the golden light of Valyria's dual suns, the coronation ceremony proceeded. Aelira, Cerys, Vaila, and Nyx stood before the assembled crowd, each bearing marks of the recent battle, a bruised arm here, a tattered sleeve there, but holding their heads high in unity. A high priest invoked the blessings of Valyria's ancestral spirits, chanting words that echoed through the courtyard. Thousands of citizens and off-world ambassadors watched in rapt attention. Then came the pivotal moment, the presentation of the celestial accord blade. All four princesses, joined by Ethan, surrounded the dais. With measured grace, Nyx placed her hand upon the hilt. She looked to her sisters, who each rested a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. Then, she looked to Ethan, who nodded, placing his hand over hers on the sword's hilt. A hush fell upon the multitude. Together, they drew the blade aloft. Prismatic light danced across the courtyard, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Tension lifted, replaced by a sense of awe, acceptance, and renewed hope. Alyra raised her voice, carrying authority and warmth. Citizens of Valyria, by the power vested in us through our father's decree and the ancient traditions of our people, we proclaim Nyx as the queen, rightful bearer of the celestial accord blade. Let it be known that we stand together, now and forever, as guardians of our realm. Rapturous applause swept through the courtyard. Saris and Vaila stepped aside, kneeling reverently, signaling their respect for the new monarch. Even Alyra, who by tradition might have claimed the throne herself, bowed to her younger sister. Nyx, eyes shining with both humility and pride, accepted the crown from the high priest. The weight of it settled on her brow as she cast a radiant smile across the gathered throng. At her side, Ethan Drake knelt, still gripping the blade. He, too, was recognized, guardian of Velyria, consort by royal decree. Though his face burned with embarrassment at the sudden wave of attention, he felt a profound sense of belonging. Amid the thunderous ovation, Nyx gently helped Ethan rise, their hands interlaced. A glimmer passed between them, relief, gratitude, and the first spark of something deeper. The weeks following the coronation brought challenges, yet an undercurrent of optimism gripped Velyria. Nyx ruled with her sister's full support, blending arcane wisdom, martial vigilance, diplomatic finesse, and intellectual rigor. Ethan accompanied them to council meetings, diplomatic summits, and public events, forging alliances and healing rifts that Koratha's treachery had inflamed. In time, the masked conspirators' network was dismantled, and scattered fragments of dark research were sealed away or destroyed, lest another fanatic attempt to wield them. The black statue in the royal garden remained under Nyx's vigilant care, monitored for signs of cosmic alignments that might pose a threat. She often consulted with Ethan, eager for any Earth-based insights into ancient phenomena. A gentle transformation occurred in the relationships between Ethan and the princesses. Alyra came to admire his earnest pursuit of knowledge, often inviting him to debates on governance and science. Saris, still fierce, found in him a sparring partner who was always ready to improve, forging a bond tempered by shared sweat and bruises. Vaila valued his perspective on negotiations, encouraging him to serve as a bridge between Earth and Valyria. And Nyx, she had found in him a confidant, someone who stood beside her in the face of cosmic mysteries and personal fears. Rumors whispered through the palace that the queen's personal guard would soon become a royal consort in the fullest sense, officially bound by ceremony and recognized throughout the Galactic Council. Some doubted, some gossiped, but most found hope in the union, a symbol of collaboration between worlds once divided by ignorance and distance. One twilight, Ethan stood upon a balcony overlooking Seraphar. The city lights twinkled in the valleys below, and beyond rose the lavender peaks that cradled the capital. He felt the warm breeze of an alien world on his skin, as comforting now as the sunlight of Earth once was. A soft voice spoke at his side. Nyx emerged from the shadows, wearing a simple gown rather than her regal attire. She looked more at ease, free from the demands of royal ceremony. "Do you miss Earth?" she asked quietly, leaning on the railing beside him. "Yes," he admitted, "sometimes. I miss the little things, coffee shops, old bookstores, the smell of rain on asphalt. But Valyria has become my home in ways I never expected." She nodded, gaze drifting over the city. "You have given much to be here. Our people see you as a symbol of hope, an embodiment of the unity my father dreamed of. And I see you as someone who cares deeply, whose heart is open to all that is different and new." Ethan smiled, heart thudding softly. "I only do what I can, my queen." Nyx placed a gentle hand on his, her eyes reflecting the glow of distant city lights. "Ethan, we stand at the threshold of a future uncharted. My sisters and I have chosen a path of cooperation over division. And you, with your unwavering support, I can think of no better companion to walk beside me." Ethan turned to face her fully, her hand still resting upon his. It would be my greatest honor. A quiet moment passed, two figures bathed in the amber glow of Valyria's setting suns, bearing the weight of a kingdom's dreams, yet finding comfort and promise in each other's presence. Somewhere in the night sky, beyond the shimmering towers, stars blazed. They bore silent witness to an unlikely alliance that had blossomed from misunderstanding and prejudice. Within the arches of that starlit palace, Ethan Drake had found a calling, a family, and the stirring beginnings of a love that transcended worlds. And so, despite the trials and conspiracies, despite the unknown challenges that lurked beyond tomorrow's horizon, Valyria ushered in a new era, an era shaped by bonds formed among four extraordinary princesses, a legacy passed down by a bold Terran explorer, and the unwavering heart of a human who rose to become their guardian and, in time, a beloved consort.